actually, let me hit record button. And to do, right, to do some of that learning actively, right? And so, so this you can also say this almost like part two of the last one that we did
Hmm.
on gaming. And so
Okay.
one update. I'm sorry.
I just said okay.
So one update, and this is pretty cool. And I said I gotta show this to you guys. So again, I work with faculty who open their courses to me and they're open to ideas. And so one professor that I work closely with is Lorenzo Wang, who I mentioned at the first workshop on gamification. And so I think I had mentioned at that workshop that I was working on a game based on Among Us. I don't
Hmm.
know if you're familiar Among Us, which is a very popular game.
Yeah,
Where
my nephew talks about it all the time.
so you're familiar with the idea of the game, or you played it before?
Yeah, yeah.
So just for those who don't know the game or haven't played it, basically the idea of the game is you're in a spaceship and there are a group of people in the game, and these are online, right? So you might not know some of these people, and so the object of the game is you want to eliminate people that are in the spaceship, and so you don't want to get caught doing it, right? You don't want to if you're gonna put someone down, you want to do it when no one else is around, so there's no evidence or there's no um, witnesses, right? And so I took that mechanic, that game mechanic, and we brought it into Professor Wang's course where she's doing a midterm review. And so what we did was we put the students into groups, and I think there were maybe 14, 15 students in this particular class. And she gave them a heads up, for the midterm review, we're going to meet in class. This is a face-to-face class now. And it was over here, C3 something. It was one of those rooms where the tables are all bolted to the floor, and they're like, you can't do circles. And so very difficult to kind of get the groups into circles. I mean, so we were limited in that way. And so we just had like 3 rows, and these are just straight tables that run from one end to the other end of the room. And so what we did is we broke the students into groups. I think we had 4 students, 4 in each group. And then what I did was I got these post-it notes. And before the class started, Professor Wang introduced me and I'm talking to the students. So I'm trying to already figure out who are the quiet students and who are the very talkative students. And so I got an idea already, just opening up and just talking to them, introducing myself, and just going around and talking to the students, just chit chat. And so I already had marked who was going to be a mole or the saboteur, like the saboteur of the group, because I'm aiming for those who are very talkative, right? So I don't want to pick someone who's shy to be a saboteur in this game. So there were 4 groups of 4, and I already had marked who I thought were very talkative students. And then I went around with my post-its,
This is a
and
face-to-face class or online?
this was a face-to-face class.
Face-to-face, okay.
Yeah, I think this can also be done online. In this case, it was just a face-to-face class. Um, and I've been working with Professor Wang for a while, but we moved from remote to then the face-to-face. So now we still want to work together, but now she's doing mostly face-to-face classes. Eventually, she's doing an online course, and we'll try more games online. So then I have my little X on my post-it card, and I go around, I place one of these in front of every student's desk, and under it will say an X or you will have an X or no X on the card. And if you have an X, you are the saboteur of that group, right? And so if you don't have an X, you are actually you're an actual member of the group, but the students don't know. And so I say to them, don't reveal what you got in the from the card, from the little post-it note. And so there's one saboteur in each group, and so you have to really explain to the students what what is the role of that mole or that saboteur. And so I really had to spend, maybe a minute or two kind of explain to them and giving them some strategies and ideas on what they can do as a saboteur. And so I say to them, if you have the little X, that means you're a saboteur. And what that means is that you infiltrated that group. You're not really a member of that team. And what you're there, your role is to confuse and create chaos and give the wrong answers to that group, right? But don't be don't overdo it, because you can reveal yourself, right? And they'll know that you are the saboteur. You have to be very strategic, right? And then if you don't have an X, you're basically trying to win the game for your team. You're playing the game as if you were want to win. But if you get the X, you really want that team to fail. So I spent some time with the students explaining that concept to them. They don't understand what's really happening here is because when we post the questions, we give 30 seconds for the teams to then discuss. There's 30 seconds of discussion. And this is really where the learning happens, I believe. So now you have the student discussing what is the correct answer to this question. And within their group, there's somebody trying to give them the wrong answers. And so kind of creating like a tug of war here where the student who's a saboteur might not know the answer, but then you have to come up with other strategic ways to kind of say, try to create some chaos, confusion within the group. And so that's the game dynamic, and that's what I kind of pulled in from um, among us. And so now I want to share with you all how I created the slides using Google Slides. So let me share my screen just to give you an idea of what the students were seeing when we created this game for them. Let me go over here. So again, very basic, very simple. There's no coding or anything like that. This is all just Google Slides. Nothing over the top, very simple. Professor Wong decided to call the game Sheer Chaos because she teaches a course on swatches, and you get the scissor, so you get the shear, and she came up with this logo, which is really nice for the game, and she wanted to put this as the opening slide to the game, and this covers kind of, I guess, the fabric of the clothing for different dresses, I guess. And this is here her Bitmoji, and we kind of try to incorporate her Bitmoji in every game that we create. The students get used to it. Of course, there's also the story element to the game, and very important. The story is so important because it draws in the student, and so we needed to come up with a good story. And since these are students that are into fabric and sustainability, we needed to create an idea of a good story background. And so what we came up with was students will be attending Premier Vision. Premier Vision Paris is the source of inspiration, creativity, business, the foresight and detection of trends, bringing together all the players in raw materials and services to assist fashion professionals develop their collections. As a designer, product development for a brand, your role is to attend fabric and trade shows for the next year's fabric trend. Answer each question assigned in each booth and collect as many, well, this I changed, collect as many booths to enable you to work and collaborate with Bolt Threads, a material solutions company, giving your brand the opportunity towards a more sustainable future. It's a little bit wordy, but basically the idea is the students have to attend this trade show, and so there are booths everywhere. And here is the goal. Each team will have the opportunity to choose a booth. Answer the questions correctly to earn the booth. The team with the most booths wins the game. If a team is unable to answer a question correctly, the other team can steal the booth. the booth will change color to indicate which team wins the booth. There is a saboteur in your group. You can decide to vote someone off your team, but be mindful not to lose a member of your team. Good luck. And that last part was kind of fun because we were trying to, just like how it is in the game Amongst Us, there's a point in the game where you have to vote, and the idea of that is you there is a saboteur in your group. So if you think you know who that person is, you might want to hold a vote, and then the team will vote, and if they can choose to kick somebody out of the team, but you have to be careful because you might, if you pick the wrong person, you might get rid of a person in your team, and that will make your team weaker. But you can also vote out the saboteur and kind of make it easier for you to progress and win the game. So that was another element that we kind of stole or borrowed from amongst us. And it's funny though because the students were so nice, they didn't want to ever vote because voting was optional, but they didn't want to vote somebody off their team, which I found very interesting that nobody wanted to vote someone off the team. They kind of felt like it was kind of rude to kick somebody out of the team. So that was one lesson learned about this game. And this is how the map eventually looked like after students were winning each booth. So whenever somebody won a booth, it turned to the color of the team. So in this case, the blue team won the supply chain. The red team won marketplace, brand, labeling. So these are all categories of, of questions based off the midterm exam. So, they have fiber properties, natural fiber, manufactured fiber. And so when a student selected a booth, let's say if you were in team one and you wanted to do supply chain, then we click on supply chain. And this is where now you get one for supply chain. There's three questions. So this is the first question out of three. And so if your team gets all three questions correct, then we go back to the map and this will turn blue for that team who completed all three questions. But if you got one question wrong, then the other two teams can steal. If they know the answer, they can steal the booth. And if they get the next two questions correctly, then that booth will turn to another color. It could be red or yellow, whatever your team color is. And we also added a 30-second timer. So for example, so I would read the question. The basic needs of people are food, clothing, and shelter. The textile industry is intertwined with, and then we run the timer here. And within those 30 seconds, now this is where the teams all huddle up and they talk amongst themselves, trying to figure out the answer. They have to use up the 30 seconds. And that, again, is purposeful because remember, we have a saboteur in the group. And so what's happening now is a dynamic where you have students trying to figure out the correct answer, and then you have the saboteur causing confusion and giving out the wrong answer on purpose. And that's intentional because we want students to really discuss and figure out the answer, and having a saboteur kind of pushes that idea further, right? Because if there were a saboteur in the group, then everyone was just trying to get the correct answer. But if we have one person in there trying to force someone to give them the wrong answer, that kind of encourages them to kind of argue why they are correct and why they are wrong, and so it creates kind of like a debate between people in a group. And creating a debate kind of helps the learning and forces the student to kind of think much more critical about why their answer is correct. So that was the idea behind this game. Um, and so up here I have a little icon that links back to the original map. So it's very easy to navigate. So you can just click on a topic, right? So here are topics, and you can click on a topic, and then it goes into the slide with those three questions along with the timer. And there's hints.
I have a quick
Well,
question. How do
sure,
you
Mikhail, yes, go ahead.
How do you get to the other three questions?
Ah, great question. Right. So let me show you. Let me show you how the slide deck looks. So on the left, let me make my screen a little bigger. It's a great question. So what I did to help me is also I color coded each booth. So for example, if I go to branding, by simply clicking on next slide, it'll move to question number 2, 2 out of 3, and I click next or the space bar, it will move to question 3 out of 3. So I know right away that I'm up to the last slide for this booth, and then that kind of indicates, or that kind of alerts me to then just click on the map to take me back home to the map.
Got it.
So you got it, right? So you see on my slide deck, you see all these are green, these are kind of like lavender purple, these are blue, these are orange. So I know um, that when I get to 2 out of 2, I know that's the last question, so I can hit home.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Okay. Yeah, that's the only way I could figure out how to alert me to kind of not pass. Because if I were to go like this, if I were to do like fiber characteristics 1, this is question 1 out of 2, then I got 2 out of 2. If I didn't have that alert that says 2 out of 2, then I would have pressed next, and I would have give them the next booth, which wouldn't allow them to choose.
Right.
Right. So 2 out of 2 tells me I got to click home, and now the next team will choose a category. That's a great question. The other thing I want to show is the voting, right? So we mentioned that voting is optional, and so I kind of said, like, after every 2 rounds, I would say, okay, class, do you want to vote? And then if they wanted to vote, then we click vote, and who is sabotaging your mission? Like I have a little meme here: sabotage, the ancient Dutch art of screwing up your own team. um, and so this is when then the students would say, okay, I have one vote that I think Patrick is the saboteur, or one person might say Mikhail is the saboteur, and so if you have the democratic rule, then you have, which never happens. So that's one lesson learned. Students never wanted to vote anybody out. They were too nice. I ran this game twice already, and no one ever wanted. There was no team that ever wanted to vote anybody off. I mean, the kids were too nice to each other. Um, so maybe I was thinking maybe you had to create a motivation or entice the students. You'll get an extra point if you find the right person to vote. I don't know, or maybe not. Maybe you don't want to vote somebody off. Maybe you continue the game the way it is and never vote anybody out. That part didn't work for whatever reason. Um, and then in this case, the team that had the most booths win. So I think it was the red team. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The red team had 5, and I think they won the game. And so we stopped there, and the game was over, and the red team won.
I have another question.
Sure. Yeah.
So there's 4 teams. Does each team get a chance to answer the question?
Yeah. Yeah. So what we did was, in this case, there were actually 3 teams. And now that I'm seeing here, we had the blue team, the red team, and the yellow team. And I think there were about 4 people in each team. So right, it was 4. So there was about 4 times 3, that's 12. So about 12 students in this class. It was a very small class, which helps. And I started with the team at the far left of the room, and then I started with them, and they chose a booth, and then they got all 3 questions right, and then we moved on to the blue team, which was in the middle of the classroom, and I think that was the yellow team. And then the yellow team got question 1 right, but then they got question 2 wrong. And then we opened it up to anyone who knew the answer to steal that booth. And then I think the red team knew the answer, and they stole the booth, or the control. They stole control from the yellow team. And then they completed the 3 questions on that booth, and so that booth turned yellow. And then what I did was once a booth is completed, then you move on to the next team in line, which was again the yellow team, right? Because they're the last, they were the third, they were the far right um, group to the far right. And so then they also had a second, they continue owning the board, and then they pick something else like natural fiber. In this case, natural fiber, all teams got the three questions wrong here. I think they got cotton right, but then they got this one wrong and this one wrong. So nobody won this booth. So then I turned it to black or whatever color. You can make it black, white, or pink, whatever. And so just to show that nobody won this booth. And that's why this color is different from the rest because nobody got this one, all three questions correctly.
So
Um,
let's
oh,
say you started with one team and perhaps they got all three questions right. So when you
right.
go to the next booth, do you just go to the next team?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Right. So let's say the team to the far left of the room, the classroom, has control and they get all three questions correctly and they win that booth. Now I move to the next team, which is the team in the middle of the classroom, and then they have a turn. I did it this way because I want everybody to have a turn, because if the same team controls the board and they continue answering all the questions, they might be able to answer everything and win the whole game and nobody gets a chance. So
Right, right.
that was my fear. I wanted everyone to get a chance. So I did like a counter clock, or I started from left to right, and then I did it that way, and that worked really well because if someone stole the booth, I still remember which team had control of the board last, and then I'll move on to the next team. Even though the same team stole and won the booth, they'll continue again because they were next in line.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so that
Jose,
yes, Patrick?
yeah, in terms of the learning curve of the game mechanics in a class, how much time do you need to allocate to explain all the instructions? And it seems to me that there might be a little bit of a learning curve. So this is not for just one session. This is something that you're making a commitment to take advantage of the benefits of the game for several sessions so that the second time around, people know the mechanics and they can go strictly into the content part rather than the mechanics of the game, right?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, which I learned so much. I learned so much doing this because we did it twice for two different classes, two different sections of the same course, and it was very interesting because one class was much more energetic, and the second one
Mm.
was a little bit more quiet, reserved. Regarding your question as to the learning curve, um, I took about, I would say, maybe 5 minutes to explain the game to the students. They figured it out pretty quick. Um, what took me a little longer, these are the two things that took the longest time, was number one, coming up with questions, because it's always hard to come up with good questions if you don't have like a question generator. That's always a challenge. The other challenge was explaining the game. Lorenzo took a while to learn, to figure out the game. Lorenzo Wong, the professor. And then once she figured it out, then she got the idea. Then I played one game with her, and then she got, okay, oh, I get it, I get it. This is why we have a saboteur. And then that was another part that took a little bit longer for her to understand. And once she got it, then she understood. The other part that did take a little bit of time was explaining to the students who I selected to be saboteurs how to become the strategies on how to be a good saboteur. It's almost like, I don't know if you ever play the game Balderdash, what's the other type of game is called that you're bluffing.
Right,
Um, I'm
right.
forgetting yeah. So
Yeah,
um, Malarkey, Malarkey.
Malarkey.
Malarkey is the other one. I love that game, right? So it's Malarkey, right?
Yeah.
So you got to get everybody on board that you're telling the truth, right? And so that's always hard to teach to a student who never And so what I had to do, Patrick, was even during the middle of the game, while I was observing the students, and I knew who the saboteur was, and I was observing the strategies that that particular student was using, and sometimes they weren't really trying as hard. And this is why I learned my lesson was picking the right person to be a saboteur is crucial. You don't want to pick a shy student that's very
Right,
quiet.
right,
You want to pick a leader in the course, right?
right, right,
So the first time I did it, I wasn't so strategic as picking the
right.
saboteur. The second time, I really went in and I said, okay, now I know. And I knew because I came into the class talking to the students, figuring
Right,
out who was, and then that helped me the second time. And that was my three
right.
lessons.
Yeah,
Uh, and so building the slides didn't take up much time because for me, I just honestly, let me show you what this was. This is actually the floor map to a real um, exhibition. Because if I remove these, you'll see these are actually a map to a
mm,
real to a real
yeah,
um, thing. And then the rest, these are all just slide with question, and then I just embed
right,
a YouTube video that had 30 seconds, and then we put some
right,
um, tips or along the way, like, okay, here is a supply chain. Here's some kids doing child
right,
labor, giving some
right.
hints. Other than that, everything else was kind of smooth. It ran
Yeah,
smoothly, and the
yeah,
feedback we got from students, and it was very similar to the last workshop. When the feedback that we gave with the other games that we did, we had an escape room. I don't know if you remember. We had an escape room with Ralph Lauren, FIT
Yeah, I
Caper.
remember that.
You remember that one?
Yeah, that one was fun.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with, and we're gonna roll that one out. I think today or tomorrow we're doing it again. Um, same feedback from the students. They were really into it as far as I can tell. And Professor Wang, looking at the student, they were really into it and they were competitive. They really wanted to win, and we saw a lot of students participate. It wasn't just a few. I mean, we did have a couple I noticed that didn't want to or didn't want to participate. Oh, well, you're gonna get that. But from what I saw, I would say a good majority, a good portion of the class, almost everyone participated, and there was a lot of competition. Now, this is a fun fact. At the end of the game, you know, the game is over and I think the red team won. And so for fun, I said to them, let's guess. I want to see if team one, can you guess who the saboteur was? And this was a lot of fun. They got a kick out of this. The students were laughing a lot. I mean, they enjoyed. They were saying, well, we knew it was Tommy because he was really forcing it. He was going extra, right? He was being too obvious here as to giving us the wrong answers every time. So it was funny, and they were all laughing about it because we knew it was him, but we didn't want to vote him out. We just stopped listening to him. So it was really funny to hear that they completely stopped listening to the person who they knew was a saboteur. I thought that was hilarious. And then the other team, I forget what they said, but there was one team that had a similar situation where they knew who the saboteur was, but they were just. And then the third team, I think they didn't know and they kind of guessed and they got it wrong. They didn't know who the saboteur was. So that was fun to at the end of the game to kind of have them guess who they thought the saboteur was, even though they didn't want to vote on the person. Just to do that whole guessing game was a lot of fun.
in terms of, it seems like the purpose of this tool is to promote class participation. But what about assessment? Does the software keep track of grading? Can the game be translated into a grade book type of tool as well or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. This one cannot be
Okay,
the scores is not keeping score like the other game that we did.
okay,
The FIT Caper was keeping a score
right,
because we used Google Forms, and then we had a track. We were tracking the correct and how many points. This one, unfortunately, I didn't get. I couldn't figure out a way to keep score. In the sense of how many people got question one right. It was much more of a by topic, right? So if you got all three questions on supply chain, then I kind of understand. I kind of get the idea that even though that one small group sample got it right, I'm assuming that the whole class should be okay. So it's more of a group sample for topics that are going to be in the exam, like supply chain, fiber properties, branding.
Wow.
But that's a great. And for assessing, so for assessments, for assessing the student, what we did was like we did prior on the other games. When a question was answered incorrectly, we will stop, and then Professor Wang will explain and go into detail, almost like a micro lecture. So that's another key point was whenever, for example, they had trouble with natural fiber. Nobody got to own this booth. And so Professor Wong would definitely go into like a small micro lecture explaining, let me go into microfiber. So this one was obviously something they were struggling with and they were having trouble with. Cotton was easy. That question was easy. It was this one, I think, that silk, right? They had trouble with what is silk and wool. They couldn't come up with the correct answers for these two questions. And so when they get something wrong like this, we would, we would stop and kind of, she would give a micro lecture and explain um, why it's incorrect and then give them the correct answer. So that was a teachable moment whenever there was an incorrect response. We created a teachable moment where then we followed up with a micro lecture on that topic and why their response is wrong.
So it seems like the game could work better if you give an assignment for the next week class, and then everyone has to read all the subject matter. So when you come back, you test the reading comprehension by playing the game. But it's not something that you cannot use this game to introduce something new because it
Right.
assumes previous knowledge, right?
Exactly.
Right,
Exactly. That's perfectly said. Right. So this is based off on previous knowledge, whether right, and it's an assignment or reading
right,
assignment or something that they
right,
must have done. And this again is
right.
again we're doing retrieval practice, right? A lot of retrieval
Yeah,
here, right? And again, we're trying to strengthen that memory from short-term memory, retrieving it, and then trying to instead of doing the traditional way of cramming, where students just going to go the night before and cram for 2 hours, and then they might or might not pass the test, but then a few days later they don't remember anything. This is a great way to kind of introduce this every unit along the semester to do the retrieval practice, and then even though let's say we moved on from chapter one, I will bring this up again later on later on there in the semester to retrieve knowledge that was taught in unit one. So then this would be another great way to do retrieval practice, and then just to support that memory into a long-term memory and help them remember, just like you would do with flashcards. That's a great way to study is with flashcards and kind of do retrieval practice that way instead of cramming. Cramming will never work. And unfortunately, a lot of the students that I come across have never been taught how to study. And it's unfortunate because cramming is usually the way that students go with and doesn't really help for their benefit. Um, and so yeah, so this was our game. I was really happy with the results. This one didn't take much time. This was very very a quick one to put up to set up together. There's about 37 slides in total. Again, it's mostly coming up with questions and this definitely, like Patrick said, is designed to be reused a lot, reused and recycled over and over. And so I would say maybe the amount of time that we spent pays off in the long-term benefits. I would say in total hours, I think I met with Professor Wong maybe twice, 2 or 3 times. I think the third time was just to go over it and just make sure there was no glitches. But the game mechanics are very straightforward. Students didn't have any difficulty understanding their roles as a saboteur or as a member of a team. Um, it did take time. It did. I must say that I did have to reinforce the idea several times, even during the game, of giving them strategy. I said I would stop the game and say, remember, if you're a saboteur, if you don't know the answer, at least try to create chaos, confusion with your team. So kind of little reminders along when the game was being played, because I noticed as I'm observing the kids playing, some saboteurs would probably be quiet, and I would just try to kind of say, well, not giving their identity away, but just giving some advice and tips on how to um, be a better saboteur. But that was about it. I think that's the only thing I can take away,
Mm.
um, that I wish the students, and I know if I do it again with the same class, those who are saboteurs will get better and better at it. At becoming saboteurs, and not giving away their identity as that person, as a mole.
And you play this online, or it's you download the slides to your Google Suite, and then the slides are independent of the software maker or the template maker?
Yeah, that's a great question. You see, to do it online requires synchronous, right? It has to be synchronous.
Okay, right.
Um,
Yeah.
and it will work in remote teaching, like we just came out of remote teaching. This will work in remote teaching because, again, it's synchronous.
Right.
Because if each student opens up the slides independently, they're working on their own set of slides. We need one central control of the slides to control, the whole game. So that's a great question. I would try to come up with an asynchronous way of how to play this game. It will be challenging, um, but yeah, that's a good challenge to try to figure out
Mhm.
how to play a game like this asynchronously. Um, yeah, you're giving me you're giving me
No, I'm
homework.
just, yeah, no, don't take it as homework. I'm just curious, because I see on your tab, above the tab there on the address of the file, docsgoogle.com. Well, that's your presentation. It's not the game itself, right? Yeah,
Oh
the address
yes,
that you have, right? Okay,
yes, yes. So these are just the Google Docs.
right.
But no, I hear you. It would be great to come up with this game with where then students can play it asynchronously. That would be a fun way, especially for an online course that you want to, if you want to deploy this into your online course, a way to have everyone maybe try playing it asynchronous. I have to think about that. Um, but yeah, the way it's designed now is basically for synchronous teaching, whether it's remote teaching or face-to-face class. Um, and and by the way, so we had these slides being projected to the main screen in the
Mhm.
classroom, right? And so this is what was being displayed on the main screen in the projector. Um, and this is what the students were seeing. So they didn't have to bring their computers. They just watched the screen in front of them, in front of the class, and that's how they would read the questions that way. Um, so if you have any ideas for another game, I'll be happy to either meet with you, or if you just want to pitch some ideas, because now this is like I think the third game that we've created. So it's a lot of fun. And the kids are enjoying it. I mean, the feedback that we get from them. Going back to your question, Patrick, on assessment, it'll be great to do an A/B testing on this, which takes up a lot of time. But I would love to do A/B testing where we have one section of the course having a regular midterm review, the old-fashioned way, and then another section of the course doing the midterm review with a game like this, and see if it affects outcomes and how the grades differ. I mean, you need a bigger pool. You need a much more, maybe multiple sections to kind of get more data. But I would be interesting. I would be interested to do that if I have more time. But that'll be a nice research project to do, is to do an A/B testing and to see how games really affect outcomes of midterm exams. Um, but I know there's a lot of studies out there too that actually done this with results on gamification.
I have a question.
Sure.
I love all these games. I just have a harder time implementing them because a lot of what I'm teaching is more drawing and like I teach in Illustrator.
Hmm.
So I taught an Illustrator class a while ago, and the syllabus that I was not copying, but like going by, they
Hmm.
had a lot of quizzes in there. And I remember talking to the students later on, and they felt like the quizzes didn't really help them as much
Right.
because they really needed to do stuff.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, like, if you have any ideas on how I can gamify drawing.
Yeah. Again, it's having a lot of quizzes. So I believe that person was very fond of formative assessments, short quizzing, and low stakes probably quizzing, which is not bad. That's a good thing too. But you're right, right? Sometimes kids get overwhelmed with doing the same thing over and over again, and if you have about 10 or more quizzes by the end of the semester, they don't need another exam. And an exam also is one of those trigger words, right?
Hmm.
Whenever you say an exam, all of a sudden your mind goes places, depending on how traumatized you've been as a student in your years of education. That can also trigger. And so what I remember, what I used to call like chocolate broccoli. This is basically a quiz disguised in a game, right? Just like you're forcing your kids to eat broccoli, but you just put a little bit of chocolate over it, and just it tastes sweet. uh, and so converting a quiz into a game, um, is not that difficult. You just got to. Sometimes what I always find hard from my perspective is coming up with a good story. Coming
Well,
up with a good story.
it's not so much about I don't do a whole lot of quizzes anyway.
Hmm.
But I have a few games that I do play now when
Hmm.
I can find a way to ask questions or do that type of review. But a lot of it is a doing. Like I
Right.
could say, um, what's the difference between the black arrow and the white arrow, but it would make more sense to them if I came up with something where they would have to do tasks that
Ah.
incorporated those things. So it's like figuring out what a game would be to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
that is challenging.
Well, just listening to you, Mikkel, you got my brain, of juices flowing, and I was already thinking of a game when you were saying that, I don't know if you ever played Pictionary before, but you can have students, um, the students who's chosen, right? You can put them up on the front of the classroom on this, and projecting the screen to the whole class, and if you give them, let's say, uh, a bowl with little pieces of paper in there, and they pick one out, and whatever it is on that bowl, they got to draw it. But it
Hmm.
has to be done in Illustrator, and then you get, give them a little bit of time there. That might be a little fun. I don't know how,
Oh,
like
that's
a
cool.
Pictionary. Yeah, you could do like a Pictionary style game, and then they have to do it in Illustrator in front of the class, and then whoever guesses what that drawing is, then they can have a turn on picking from the fishbowl. Um, a piece of paper, and then they have to draw whatever's on there, or do it team base. You can do it a team base where now the teams are competing, right? And but they have to know
Mhm.
Illustrator, or you can focus it on layering. Okay, well you have to draw whatever you pick up from the fishbowl using a certain technique. You got to use the pen tool. You got to use the layering tool. You got to use a masking. You know, whatever it is, that technique that they have to learn for that, let's say week or unit,
Mhm.
you incorporate that into that game, and then they have to do the drawing in front of the whole class. So that's hands-on, and you
Yeah.
already incorporate it like a Pictionary game. I used to love
Yeah.
Pictionary as a kid. There's been many evolutions of Pictionary through the years, and they always keep changing it because people want to make money and continue to sell the board games. But that would be a nice way to incorporate Illustrator into a game like Pictionary, and
Yeah.
then or you can even make it more challenging. Now this is really cool. You can even say two bowls, right? The first bowl is whatever they got to draw, and the second bowl is the technique they got to use. Now that's challenging because now they don't have a heads up as to what is they got to what is the technique. They got to come in ready to know. Okay, this is what layering is. This is masking. This is all the different types of pen tools. You know,
Mhm.
and so whatever they pull up from the fishbowl, they have to know the technique offhand without being. That sounds fun. I'm already getting into it already. You see how I it's like,
I know.
just to put somebody in the spot like that, and but then they don't see it as being put in the spot because they're being rewarded is competition,
Right.
and they're getting points, and now and so a team has to elect a drawer, someone to go up front, and I'm sure they're going to pick somebody, or maybe they all have to take turns. Everyone has to go up at
Yeah.
one point, right? Something
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so
That
so
sounds
that's a
cool.
that's a quick one off the top of my head. That sounds a little bit like will be fun in your type of a class.
Mhm.
Um, and then from there you can add rewards and go, and then
Yeah.
through the semester you can have a leaderboard, a
Mhm.
scoreboard, right? A leaderboard, and as you come up with new games along the semester period, you bring up the leaderboard. And again, it's not all about being in first place, and I always discourage that because I you don't want to be the team in last place, right? And so you got to come up with ways to kind of say, you know, a healthy amount of competition is good, but you don't want the last place team to look bad, right? So you always have to think about that too. So keep that in mind as you're.
I usually just give them like a half a point or a point extra credit, and it's just like
Yeah.
whoever wins, that's who gets it. And like people who, there's no team, like there's a team that came in first and they get the extra credit, and then there's nothing for the rest of the other ones, so nobody feels bad that they lost. But what's
Right.
interesting what's really interesting is some days I'm just like, I don't even feel like I need to give anybody extra credit because they get so into like the
Right.
challenge. And you like their team won, and I'm like, I'm gonna get my extra credit.
That was one of our observations as Professor Wong and I have been working the last 2 years. At first, we began with points that were added to the midterm, like extra points. And
Hmm.
then when we saw how into it they were, we're like, wait a second, we're giving away 3 points here. They were already
Yeah,
just they were so into it already. We don't have to give a motivation. They're already motivated to play. So
yeah.
now we've taken away the extra points and we just let them play. And so that's another lesson learned from
Hmm.
as the more you do this, you realize, hey, they get so into it. I even encourage them to at times, even when we were playing among this sheer chaos, I also encourage them to kind of brag a little bit that they're winning. So just just to get loud in the room, just to get a little energy flowing, and so they didn't do that. These kids are so nice. I was so shocked. If I was, I remember as a kid, I was, younger, just being much more of a, maybe that's the competitor in me, and I don't know. It just I remember being loud and, hey, we're winning or whatever, trash talking and all this. But they were so nice. These students, I tell you, they're like, ah,
I
it's funny.
know.
Jose,
Yeah, Pat?
I like Lorenza's emoji. Uh, I noticed that she had several versions, of her emoji. Is there a software that generates that freely if you send them your picture?
Yes. I actually put together a tutorial. I used
Okay,
to have it as a requirement for our online training program, and then I made it optional because I didn't want to force anyone to make a Bitmoji. They didn't
right,
feel.
right.
I'll send that to you and
Okay,
your way. And then if you have any questions, let me know. I'll be happy to meet with you one-on-one to help you get the
right.
Bitmoji
Yeah,
running. But you see how much use we got out of that Bitmoji. We've been using it now for like everything that we do. We put
right.
a Bitmoji of the professor in there, and like you said, Pat, it has all these variations of for all the seasons. They all I could type in Halloween and it gives me like a whole
Excellent.
um,
Yeah,
collection of, like, I was in a pumpkin one time. I remember,
right.
or
Cool.
Christmas
Yeah,
or whatever you want to do, and
yeah. And a
but
follow-up question on that, if I may. Uh,
sure.
is there a way to put your picture on Collaborate so that when you turn off the camera, it shows your picture like in WebEx?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a great question. I was supposed to research that
Huh,
from our faculty show into, and I haven't done so, but I will look into it because you're right. It'll be nice to have uh, an image when you turn off your
right. Yeah,
webcam.
I'm just curious. In WebEx, it's very simple how to do it, but I haven't found a way to do it in Collaborate.
Yeah, let me write that down because if I don't write it down, I will forget. But let me
Oh,
put it here.
I don't mean to give you homework, Jose. Just, I,
Well, no,
thank
it's something I need to. It's something I need to know because, like, I didn't know that Collaborate had the upgrade. That now that you can see 25, you can see now up to 25 students at one time. Before it was only four, but they never alerted us of the update, and so
right.
I found out I found out on my own that now it can take up to 25 students
Yep.
at a
Oh, that's
time.
that's wonderful.
Yeah, they never tell you. They never tell you that whenever there's an update. And so I found that on my own, and then that's why we sent out that tip the other day. But let me write that down on photo avatar collaborate. I'll figure that out because it is a common question. All right. Well, there's any more? Wow, we're on the dot. We're at 1:59. Awesome. I, I, I'm getting better at this. I usually go over, like, way over, but
Yeah.
but
Can you
if you
send
have
me can you send me that Bitmoji tutorial also?
Sure. Yes, I will send it to you. It's a free application that you can. I'll show you in the tutorial. I show you how to download. Once you download the Bitmoji app to your, it has to be to your phone. Unfortunately, you have to download the app on your phone.
Okay.
Once you have it on your phone, from your phone, you then design your caricature. Uh, Once you're done and you're happy with your caricature, or your Bitmoji, then the next step is then you go into Chrome and you download the Chrome extension. I also show you how to do that.
Okay.
And then once you have the Chrome extension, actually it looks like this. Let me share my screen. This is
Yeah.
how it looks. Yeah, Patrick?
Yeah, I have to run to my 2:10 class
Oh,
right now.
okay. Anyway,
Thank you,
yeah,
Jose.
yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
thank
And
you
then
so
I'll
much.
send you the tutorial. No
All
problem.
right.
All right. Thank you
Thanks.
guys for coming.
Bye. Yeah, bye,
Thank
Take care
Michaela.
now.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michaela.
Bye.
Bye bye.